Welcome back to the library, dear wanderers. Today we're heading back to Library Wing 1, the Hidden Nest, back to the first Oak's shelf, where we'll pick up the first work we see. This one is the one and only work brought to the library by Midtime. Now without further ado, a caution to the wise. Transcript of a letter, one of a few dozen similar papers clipped to the pages of the Codex between the 9th and 81st. The paper is cut off neatly at the top, excluding the most of the manuscript, though one may assume that the recipient is a member of the Serpent's Hand. The date of the letter is supposed at Anno Domini 1896. How unfortunate they are to have you ask me their questions. Of course, I shan't refuse you. At your insistence, then, I shall betake myself to pen this little tale of my early days in the West. They ask for a story with a moral. The moral is, a caution to the wise, look elsewhere for your wisdom. My anecdotes are not for philosophers to look over. As for fairy tales, I can say nothing, for I have rarely seen any more point in them than in tales of fairy itself. Well, will they or nill they, it is their request, and I shall provide exactly what they ask for, in exactly their terms. Once I met a wealthy lord. He had a palace built of precious stones, land enough to bury a country, and men enough to conquer it in arms. He had a large and prosperous family, with 7 sons to whom he bequeathed more than they could have asked of him. He had livestock and slaves, allies and vassals, and, most of all, a properly vast banquet hall, in which he was not shy to hold many a merry event. All this he had, and prudence and love besides, which are at least as rare as the rest. But when I met him, there was one matter in which his heart was less than wise. When I met him, he lamented, "If only I were free." This desire he thought an idle fancy, knowing the folly of it, but, withal, it happily seems he nurtured it within him all the while, and cared for it very much. I made myself a dove, and he bade me tell him a story of the outside. I shall tell thee 100 stories, and do thee 1 service besides, said I. Eagerly he cried out, "What will it be?" But I cocked my head and began to tell. I spoke to him of the things that I remembered, and many that I forget, all of travel and freedom in the open air. It matters not the breadth of what I told him, for he loved it very much all the same, and it was through this that I found out his desire, and let it blossom all the more. I mentioned the southern temples, dedicated to the spirits of dead men. I alluded to the northern bears, who live in castles of stone and eat as plentifully as the kings of men, and cannot be tricked. And at last I spoke of the secret of the Eastern merchant, who makes for himself an effigy of clay, and sets it to watch over his affairs whilst he spends his days untroubled. He writes a word on its forehead, and it comes to life and serves him. When I saw the look of rapture that came into his face, I finished my tale and asked him then, "Knowest thou now what my service will be?" For a moment this puzzled him, and then he besought me to tell him more of the clay men. "It is not that," said I, "but nearly." He besought me again, asking if I might teach him the way the effigy was shaped. "It is not that," said I, "but nearly." "What will thy service be then?" cried he at last, exasperated. "For there is nothing I have desired more." "I shall surely show thee," I laughed. "I have prepared it for thee already, O august Lord, that thou shouldest suffer no labor on thy back. Come thou tomorrow to thy garden, and I shall show thee how it may serve." I flew away, and that evening and night I spent in the fashioning of a clay image of the Lord, to set in the back of his palace garden. When I was done, as a bird once again, I perched upon it and waited for his arrival till the morning. Eagerly I waited, for I had not told him that words alone could not make clay living flesh. Only life begets life, and only man's soul can create a lifelike man. When he came, I found him not alone. He had brought a servant who looked on me with disdain when I spoke. "Willst thou accept my service?" I asked the Lord. "Surely I will," rejoined he at once, for his ardor had not grown less overnight. "Then take this," said I, "and it will be thine." I offered my orb to him, and the servant at once stepped forth to take it for him. He took my orb in his hand, whereupon my spirit surged forth from within it, as was its wont, and seized his immortal soul from out his body, and set it in the body of the clay man. Then I wrote a word on the forehead of the effigy, and its clay became flesh and blood and bone, and it came alive. The Lord, looking fearfully down at the body of his servant, inquired of me what I had done, though he well knew. "My service to thee, my lord," I told him, "and methinks it will serve thee well." I flew to the ground and reclaimed my orb where it had fallen, and then once more to the head of the clay man, who stood yet motionless and with silent gaze. "What name hath thy servant?" "I do not know his name, nor his voice, nor his face," said the Lord evenly. "He was no person to me." I whispered into the ear of the clay man, and then spoke to the Lord. "If formless he was, then golem it will be called. By golem thou shalt call it, when thou enjoinst it to a task. Now thou art free to roam the world. But what have I imposed upon myself? He cried. For this, what rumination might thou enjoin me to? For he sensed, as the wiser of men do, that I was more than I showed him. Thy recompense to me shall be nothing that thou committest not of thine own will, or that thou hast committed of thine own will. I answered him. And thou wilt realize it only with time. Surely it will not dull thy freedom. Rejoice, O august Lord, for thou art unbounded forthwith, and hence till the day of thy return. I departed forthwith, but saw him dispose of the servant's body and enjoin the clay man, with much careful instruction, to care for his property and household until his return. I saw him set out, doubtless in his heart of many grand adventures to come. I did not follow him, but repaired to the palace once again when he had gone, to whisper in the clay man's ear. Thou wilt carry thy burden well, I said to it, for thou art a good servant to me. Do as I bid thee until thine old lord's return, and I shall set thee free. It did not answer, being mute, and there was no choice within it, nor happiness, nor misery. I did many things in the Lord's absence, and it matters not what I did. But the day came when he returned. I saw him as I walked along the silent roads of the city that surrounded his palace. I became a dove again and went to meet him. He was barefoot and leant upon his staff, and he looked about himself as if confused, and I saw that his soul was about to leave him. I perched on a nearby tree and inquired of him, Why hast thou returned? I have wandered to the 4 corners of the earth and far beyond them, said he, and seen greater and more awful sights even than thou hast recounted to me, little bird. And why hast thou returned? I asked again. I have grown sick of wandering, and long for my home once again, which the claimed man thou hast fashioned for me hath kept in my absence. Where is he? Where is my home, little bird? 'Tis here and hence, I answered him, and thy golem hath kept it just as thou hast willed it. Not one grain of thy storehouses, or coin of thy treasuries, hath been otherwise spent, nor hath thine possessions or thine household suffered unduly. Why, dost thou doubt the truthfulness of my words, that are bound by higher laws even than thine own, O august Lord? Who art thou, trickster? Where is my family? What hast thou taken from me? Thou wert wise, yet thine heart fails, and thine senses dim. Dost thou still not know my price, nor understand the value of my service? What price can I owe thee when I cannot reclaim what is mine? Cried the Lord. I gave thee freedom, said I. For all thy life since our last meeting thou hast walked freely, nor hath obligation or responsibility bound thine heart. Thou hast enjoyed it till thine heart and soul were filled, and now that soul which can enjoy nothing more shall leave thee. That is my repayment. Hearing this, he fell to his knees and wept. Who art thou, deceiver, thief? Such petty names from thy noble mouth. And I descended and returned to my true form, and told him my name of names, and offered him my orb. When he heard that name, he despaired, and the light at last left his eyes completely. He bequeathed his soul willingly to me. I thanked him then, and passed on to the palace, where the clay man still sat enthroned. I whispered in its ear, Thou art released. And, writing another word on its forehead, caused it to crumble to dust, and of the whole grand demesnes, all the Lord's household and his properties there remained but chaff and water. There, pass them that to keep in their records, and do you describe to me in detail the looks they have on their faces. I am, and will remain, your humble and obedient servant, in letter, if not spirit. Y.K.W. Remember to always be careful, dear wanderers. There are so many things that you could wish for, want for, ask for, or even do. And just as many as there are an equal number that should never be done. For now, though, we'll move on to the next work. This one seems to be another page from the Journal of Aphromoth's Long Journey. It was brought to the library by Dr. Everett Mann. Now, without further ado, 81st turn, 7th year, 14th cycle, Skalday. From the Journal of Aphromoth's Long Journey, Pilgrim. With notes by Avostor, scholar of Reeve Library. Skalday, 14th cycle, 7th year, 81st turn. 7th day in the trees. Martap is dead. He still would not eat this morning and was no longer mewling for food. By afternoon he had stopped breathing. I buried him away from the trail and made a small cairn over the grave. I said a prayer for him before I left. May he have water for his journey, and stars to guide his steps. My own steps were heavy and slow. I had lost one cat, and the other was slowly dying. For guidance I chanted as I walked. And a footnote here. Barrow chanting is typically described as being not unlike a ruminant with bad yet very rhythmic digestion. Hoping the low tones would raise my spirits and perhaps bring us luck my passenger and I. Some kind god must have found me, for when I stopped that afternoon, Soja began to eat the small strips of meat I gave to her. Slowly, at first, then ravenously. I swiftly caught 2 more birds for her, that she would have fresh meat. She is still weak, and I am not sure yet if this has saved her. But I am hopeful. While she ate her fill, I built a small shrine to whatever god of the forest or of the roads listened to my prayers. As I write this, she is sleeping by the fire. We traveled again and are now in a clearing near a stream. There are wildflowers growing, and I am comforted by this remainder of life. Though even here, there is strangeness. The stream flows uphill. And footnote here, no one knows why streams like this form in parts of the Raffle Woods. There are 3 competing theories. The first is that they are a basic consequence of the instability of time and space in the Raffle Woods. This was proposed by Bedlam Baroque in his work, The Palace of Light. The second is that the strange magics that tend to collect in the woods cause them to form. This was proposed by Ixtrot Misplore in his volume What You Don't Want to Know About the Ravel Woods, but I shall tell you anyway. Finally, the oldest of the 3 theories, seen earliest in a work by Varnip the Larger himself, is that it's just one of those things, capitalizations his. While it lacks a certain scientific rigor, I admit there are times I want to catalog entire sections of the Raffle Woods lore under this category. I was unsure at first, but I tested the slope by rolling small pebbles down by the bank of the stream, and by floating small leaves in the water. The pebbles rolled one way, but the stream flows the other. When I took a quick walk upstream, I found a waterfall, where the water jumped to the top. There is magic here. I am sure of it. Still, it has fish, and I caught several for us. If she will eat, I will be sure to feed her. And that's all the time we have for today, dear wanderers. Thank you very much for coming. It, of course, has been an honor reading for you. Good luck out there, and I hope to see you all next time.